Let's go, baby. Welcome to another episode of the Athletes and Assets podcast. I'm your host, Noah Lack, and I bring on your favorite athletes or very well-known executives to chat about entrepreneurship from the athlete's perspective. Please like, follow, subscribe, and we have a great episode today with Joey Zwillinger, former co-founder and CEO of Allbirds, the once billion-dollar shoe company, sustainable fashion, was a former soccer player at Cal University as well. And so we kind of bridged the gap between his soccer experience and what he's done as an entrepreneur. Pretty awesome stuff. Hope you enjoy the episode. Let's get it. Quoting you saying when you started Allbirds, how petrified you were of being in the middle.
Yeah.
So either you wanted to be like fail, and you knew it was a failure, or you wanted to be really good.
Yeah.
But like you were scared of being in the middle.
Yeah.
Which is just a common thing amongst like a lot of incredibly successful people. And I fear that too. But I think it's different than sports because even if I was or maybe a lot of people think I was an average basketball player, I still love the game. I was successful to me. But I think as we talk about when we translate what you've learned in sports to company building, maybe that's something that you didn't want to take with you to building Allbirds, because a lot of people are happy being an average sports player, but clearly you weren't happy. You weren't going to be happy being an average. You can't.
I think that feedback, that thought on life is different than it is a business. Yeah. I think that sports prepare you for life, and I think a business that you do. The way I think about it, I treat the business, particularly when you're starting a business. And I think what you're referencing is when I started Allbirds, I was very much of the mindset that you gotta fail very quickly or succeed very significantly.
Yeah.
And anything in between it petrified me, because you could kick the can for years and years and years going down and come out with nothing at the other end, and you've wasted a huge chunk of the most important time of your life, kind of a thing. And I started Allbirds when I was mid-30s. So I thought that was a formative part of my, growing up years as a professional in business. And I didn't want to be in that middle part. So I structured the business. I financed the business with the objective in mind that I would have a chunk of cash that would allow me to fully test the idea with the consumer, and deploy enough cash such that if I got a positive signal from consumers, I knew it was going to be successful, which meant what I needed to avoid was getting a false positive. And a way to get a false positive in a consumer business with inventory is, you don't have very much, and you have a really successful run out of the gate. You have a nice launch, and all of a sudden you don't have any product to sell, and you're like, oh, we're incredibly successful, but we sold $20,000.
Yeah.
And that's not success. That's potentially a really bad false positive. And I didn't want to do that. So what I did was I picked the two most important things in our business, and any consumer business, this is true, it's product and marketing. And we piled every dollar that we had into those two areas to both make the best product that we possibly could. So a minimum lovable product is what I think you launch a consumer business with, not a minimum viable product, which might be true for software. And when you get that, when you have enough energy into that product, then all of a sudden you get a chance of success. Then you need to amplify that story incredibly well. So we focused all of our dollars. So I would say, going back to, fortunately, Allbirds, we sold $1 million in the first month. We started selling out certain SKUs, and then we backed up the truck and kept driving it. So I don't think that was a false positive. I think it was a really positive, and we really caught something with our first product and the message that we sent to the world. So that was great. But going back to the sports analogy, I think sports teaches you incredible amounts of resilience. And when you're an entrepreneur, you need to have that in spades, because it's so hard, and you get punched in the face every week. You get a big punch in the face usually, and you gotta breathe, take a deep breath, be like, okay, my whole plan was based around this one thing, and I just got punched in the face on that one thing.
Yeah.
And then you need to, after you take a breath, you need to be like, all right, I need to problem solve around this. And I think that's the preparation that sports can bring. But I treat the business when I'm starting it like a game, not like a career in sports. Because the game, you just need to do everything that you possibly can to win.
Yeah.
But sometimes you lose, and that's okay. And you learn from your losses. And so I think when you start a business, treating it more like a game than an entire sporting career, if you're going to use the metaphor, is a lot more valuable of an approach and a mindset to take to that business.
Absolutely. May I ask, were you married when you started Allbirds?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we had 2 kids already. They were like one. We have twins, and I think they were 1 at the time. So that, yeah.
I underestimate kind of the exterior situations before like starting a company. Like,
yeah,
you got 2 twins.
What we talked about, we did. So this is, going back to the 2-year chunk of time that I focused on and thinking I wanted to succeed or fail within that 2-year chunk of time.
Yeah. We
took money for that would last us, we thought, for 2 years. It probably was the right amount at the time. I talked with my wife, and she's been one of the most instrumental people in my professional career. I mean, like both the overwhelming family support, but also just strategy and business. And she's a brilliant brand thinker and brilliant in a lot of ways, people as well. So she's been enormously helpful. But one of the things that we did in the beginning was we said, okay, I have a thing going on in work, and I can make decent money from that. I'm going to take these 2 years and pay myself virtually nothing. And so there's this like amount of money that we would have otherwise made, and that's what we're going to spend from our personal, whatever we have, which was not much. And that we have 2 years. Mm-hmm. So like, that's how I'm thinking about it in my family, in my work, with the financing that I'm raising. And I never like suggested anyone otherwise. I wasn't saying I'm in this for 20 years, no matter what, from the beginning. Like, I don't think that's a reasonable thing to say or think. So we had an internal family, I guess you call it a meeting, but I did them like the first personal budget of my entire life. And
hey, you came from a Goldman finance background. That was the first time you like.
Yeah, but I just always figured it would work out, and so I didn't really worry about the budget, and we didn't live like in a fancy way, so it was just like,
This was in Marin?
We had just moved to Marin, because we had the kids. We had the kids before.
There.
No. And maybe it was naive, but I've just never really worried about it because I've just always thought like good hard work and focus and following something that I really like is going to work out in the end. But yeah, so we did a family meeting and set up a 2-year time horizon, and we said that's the investment we're making. And then when we launched the business, we ended up raising another round of capital months after we launched to consumers, and that kind of reset the clock another 2-3 years.
Yeah.
So, and I think those gates get a little longer, but never longer than 3 years. Yeah. Even when I took the company public, it was like another 2-3 years. Wow. And I felt like if we did a good job as running the team and building the business, that was an adequate amount of time for investors that I raised money from in the IPO that we could say, hey, we're passing this on and doing that.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's. I have a healthy respect for anyone who starts a company, but especially if you already like have kids, have like more responsibilities than just yourself, rather than just a guy like, in a studio. And I have a girlfriend, but it's a studio in the Russian Hill, and you have like little responsibilities.
Yeah, but I mean, the attitude we took was, I'm going to kill myself if I'm like 50 years old and I look back and I've been like running corporate jobs for 20 years or 15 years. And
share that
I'll be petrified. So like, when's a better time to do it than, as they say, if you didn't plant a tree yesterday, the best time to plant a tree is today.
Yeah.
So we had to do it before, while the kids are still young and they didn't know what was going on, and before all the constraints around spending money on youth sports, which is insane, and all the excess costs that come into when you raise a family. Then we wanted to do it then.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Even before Allbirds, before even the Goldman, the jobs you had after school, for our sports crowd, man, you played soccer at Cal. And when I think about what I remember from my college experience, I think about this guy from the College of, I think, Charleston, the NCAA tournament. And people asked them, after they lost in the Sweet 16 or round of 32, they asked him, what do you remember? What are you going to remember most from your college basketball experience? And he starts crying really deeply, and he's like, the Chick-fil-A with the guys, like when you think about your college athletic experience, like what gets you excited again?
It was an interesting experience for me. I mean, I unfortunately got injured in my second year badly enough that it was not going to be that possible for me to continue. And I ended up having a really great time in college after I played sports. So I kind of got the best of both worlds on that. And I never really had any aspiration to be like a professional athlete in soccer.
You rush fraternity after?
Yeah. So I did that and did a whole bunch of exploration. I was an engineer, so like I had a bunch of different buckets of categories of friends. But I'll take it a little more serious note on this. I rather than there's a ton of amazing fun times, and like being an athlete in college is awesome. And doing that at Berkeley is a special place to do it. But I would say one of the most interesting things that I took out of it and that has stuck with me for the rest of my life, and I've put it into a lot of things I do business-wise and also some things I do in the nonprofit sector, has been what the true definition of diversity and inclusion is inside of an organization. And what I remember, like, reflecting on it a little bit after my college career and thinking about it in business, and diversity started to be a topic in corporate world for very significantly recently, but well before that's always been a thing. But I think people miss what is the real objective, and I think sports teaches you exactly what that objective is. You don't you don't look at Sam and you see Sam's a black guy. Yeah. You see Sam is an incredible striker. He's fast as shit, and if we play the ball over here and give him a through ball, he's gonna take it and he's gonna bang a G. Yeah. And like that's what you think about Sam. Like he happens to be a black guy, but that has nothing to do with how you think about him. You think about him as the role that he can play on the team and the output that's going to be generated because he's on the team. And that was true for my youth sports career when I was in high school, in my club team in particular. But it was also very significantly true. And I saw when you have a true meritocracy and you have a bunch of people from diverse backgrounds, you're going to get a much, much better outcome. And the inclusiveness comes in because what I just said, you see people as their role and their contribution to the outcome that you're driving for the team, not based on some like identity mark that they may have, either an inside or an outside kind of identity, self-identity that they have. And that has stuck with me very significantly. So how do you recreate something like that in a corporate environment, and where are the gaps in place where you can truly allow people to thrive on the output that they're going to generate for the business, not to hit some kind of a dumb metric that really has nothing to do with the output of the metric. But that said, I do believe deeply that when you open up the doors and you create an environment inside a company where everyone can thrive based on the output, you're going to have a much more diverse population, and you're also going to have a much better outcome.
So when you were a freshman getting like haze in the locker room, you were kind of like, yeah, anyone can get it. It doesn't matter who you are.
No, definitely. I had like long flowing hair, and that thing got shaved off. So yeah, we went through all that stuff.
Obviously, we think about teamwork. We think about like grit, leadership, and all that's in diversity inclusion, which was huge for Allbirds, obviously, and as well as you've incorporated sustainability into the company. Do you ever draw back on a time where, I don't know, coach was yelling at Zwillinger and just thinking about like taking some of those parallels of the adversity you went through in soccer to running the company?
I would say the thing about sport that's awesome is sometimes you find yourself out of your depths. And maybe this isn't true for superstars, but I was never going to be a superstar. Maybe LeBron never had this experience, but or maybe he's having it now. But where you're playing with a group of guys that all of a sudden you're at a new level. Yeah. And when you put yourself into that situation, you need to like look deep inside yourself and figure out like how can you rise to the occasion and how can you elevate your level. And I think when you have a business and a startup, it's one thing. When you go to the next level, it increasingly becomes something where you're stepping up, and sometimes you could have the perspective when you find yourself in that situation that you're out of your depth. But the alternative framework to think about it is, this is a new experience. There's a lot of good people out there, but they're also human and they figured some things out, and I'm going to figure it out. And I'm going to raise my level and learn what I need to do to think about this next phase. What do I need to do to be better? And they're very different skills sometimes, very different things that you need to learn. And so I've tried to be reflective and self-aware of like, hey, here's the things that got me here. Are they the things that are going to get me to the next stage? And usually the answer is something like, yeah, some of that needs to be like very significantly front and center, but I also need to add this other capability in order to rise to the occasion. And that next phase, whether that's, when you're 5 people in a room, you can figure out everything with a spreadsheet and phone calls and, you're just making shit happen. Yeah. But when you have 1,000 people in the company and you're speaking to different populations within the company, you need to learn how to communicate really effectively against the vision. And it's the same vision, but it needs to be articulated sometimes in slightly different and more nuanced ways. And those skills and those things aren't necessarily second nature to everyone, and certain things are and certain things aren't. And when you find something that isn't, either you need to complement it with a great executive to help you do that, or you need to figure it out yourself. And I'd say that's the great parallel between sports that I've experienced. And fortunately, I wasn't a superstar, so I had to rise to the occasion many times. And and that I think that helped me quite a lot.
Well, if you don't mind me asking, what has been the lowest point of your journey in Allbirds, and how did you rise to the occasion?
God, I think back, I don't know if it's the lowest point, but there's been quite a roller coaster throughout the decade that I've been there, and now I'm no longer involved in the day-to-day business. I passed it on to a fantastic team, and I'm on the board, and that's it. That's a whole different skill now that I'm trying to get good at. But it's very, very different. Yeah. But I would say even going back to the really early days, I remember we raised our first round of financing. I was toting around a bag of shoes, prototypes, in a giant white linen bag up and down the streets of Manhattan in like the sweltering heat in the summer. Trying to raise a round of financing to give us some capital.
You chose New York versus SF.
It's a consumer market.
Yeah.
We were going out. We weren't a tech company. Sure. We were going to be a tech-enabled business, but which every business is. But we're a real consumer play. We had our marketing partners out there. We had a lot of investors who understand consumer in New York versus San Francisco. Sure. So yeah, I was toting up that bag up the street. We raised the round, and then I would say 7 days later, after this was probably, let's call it July of 2015, we had said we were going to launch in March of 2016, and something like an 8-month clock that we imposed on ourselves was starting to tick, and we got a call from our factory, and they're like, all right, we've reevaluated the quotes that we gave you, and here's the new quote for how much it's going to cost to manufacture the shoe. Here's the logistics, and it was like zero chance that would ever work.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there with
drops.
Exactly, one of those moments, and that's what I talk about. You get punched in the face in these situations. So I called 3 people, and from my network. One of them was a guy I played soccer with at Cal, and also before that in high school. His name was Chris Ronier. He had been messing around in the shoe industry, so I'd called him, and he ended up being the person who linked me to a guy named Michael Joe in Korea. I sent 3 what we call tech packs, which is essentially like the basic set of materials, a mold of the shoe, which we call the last, and 3 prototypes of the outsole of the shoe and the bottom of the shoe. And we sent him to 3 factories. Michael Joe was one of the factories based in Korea. I flew out there and met with 2 of the 3 factories that were Korean based. The third was a U.S. based manufacturing company, and went to the table, put all 3 to the test, created a little horse race, and Michael stood out head and shoulders above the rest. And so we ended up working with that factory for 7 years.
Wow.
And it was a really, really good relationship that was incredibly vital to any kind of success we would or wouldn't have at Allbirds around making something that was within a millimeter tolerance to be successful in a shoe. It needs to literally be, every single piece needs to be within a millimeter tolerance, and you need to make 1 million of them. And so you need to figure out how to industrialize this process, get it really tight in terms of the tolerances and the quality, particularly with a shoe that was designed like we did, which is can look kind of like a simple shoe, but doing something in design that's simple is exceptionally hard. And when you're reductive like that, you expose all of the vulnerabilities of a manufacturing process. So we needed it to be like very, very good quality. They also needed to be extremely flexible because we were selling directly to the consumer, so forecasting demand is incredibly hard, and it can go up and down sometimes. So these guys showed up great, and we figured it out, and we had shoes on the water by January. Got them into our warehouse and launched on time, and had a great one.
Well, that's a hell of a story. And remind me the name of the manufacturer that accepted you guys that you work for.
They're called Nova.
Shout out Nova, because you know what? Still standing today, man. And these are really good shoes. And I'm not just saying that because you're here. I've had these for a long time.
Yeah, fantastic.
As you can see. So get you guys a pair. Free promo right here. We'll cut it for Allbirds. When I went to the store, it was Jackson Square.
Mm-hmm.
That store, when I walked into the store, the design of the store was so profound that I literally told the person who wanted to help me 1 second, and I sat down and I observed your store for 30 minutes. And I couldn't help but notice how careful and crafted everything was, from how the shoes were laid out to the wallpaper to also how there's not too many options. It was enough choice where there was more than, you could find something you want, but there wasn't an oversaturated amount of shoes in the store. And I think that really speaks to how careful and thoughtful you guys have been with just everything. Everything freaking matters.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just speak about like the energy you put into, let's just stay here with the design of the shoe? Because I think it's really simple but super sleek.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think in general, it's sometimes easier to come into an industry that you're not burdened by the legacy of how things are always done. And that was true for what Tim and I walked into with the shoe industry. I mean, he'd been tinkering around with shoes for a number of years, but never done anything at scale. And so I'd say both of us were real outsiders into the industry. And when you have that beginner's mind, when you come into a new space, new industry, whatnot, I think you have the ability to dispel an answer that's given to you that says this is the way we do it because that's the way we do it.
Yeah.
You're able to ask the question and just out of curiosity, like, but why is it done that way? Like, what's the benefits and what are the trade-offs? And you quickly come to a realization that there's a lot of answers that are this is the way we've done it that aren't really that logically sound. And at some point in time, I'm sure they were brilliant.
Yeah.
But the world changes and things change and trends change and everything around you externally that is so significant in terms of the impact to your business, it does change. Yeah. And so the decisions that were good at one point may not be good at another. And so I think, taking a beginner's mind approach to everything when it comes to designing the shoe and stripping to a very reductive style of almost industrial design versus fashion design, where in fashion design you'd want to load up the overlays and load up all the stuff that brings it the ability to make it extremely flashy and stand out. We took a much more industrial design approach to say, let's we've done this incredible R&D on materials, and we've done, the shoes you're wearing are made of eucalyptus fiber. They got a sugarcane bottom. They got a insole that's made out of castor bean oils, and every single material choice, every single design when it comes into how you're going to use it, we wanted to let the beauty of the R&D show through into the shoe. We wanted to let the benefits that those materials conveyed to the consumer have the maximum chance of delivering that value. And so we decided on this really reductive approach. And we also saw that was what we believed, this trend where the workplace was getting casualized. people were working on their phone, working on the go, working remotely, even back then. And the idea that you could have a shoe that really met in that kind of athleisure space, for lack of a better word, was something that was a forever change that was going to happen for many decades at minimum, and that people weren't going back to suits and brown shoes in any significant quantity, and the trend was going to be going against that in terms of the way the tide was shifting. So we felt really good about that, and hence the reductive design approach, the material forward nature of it, that played a role. And we took that to everything. You said the website, the store, every consumer touch point had to really ladder up to that same clear message that we were giving to the consumer, and we tried to be maniacal about every detail, particularly in the beginning, because you want it to be as good as it can. And then sometimes along the way you lose your way a little bit and you lose a little focus on that. You try things, some of those things work, some of them don't. Yeah. And then you have to kind of recalibrate how your business is going to be set up for success in that new environment.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you admire Steve Jobs? Well, I felt like when I walked into Allbirds, it was like the Apple of shoes.
Who doesn't?
Yeah. Because when I go in an Apple store, there's a lot of choices, but it's still very simplistic and like how it's.
Yeah, I mean, Tim will talk about a lot. My co-founder at Allbirds, he talked a lot about like the one table in the Apple workspace, where if you had too many projects and if you put all your projects on a single table and they couldn't fit, then you were working on too many things. Yeah. So I think our focus was always with that in mind. Tim and I always said, for every thing you say yes to, hopefully you said 99 no's to. And same for the projects that we worked on and the focus we took to the projects. And with a small team, you can't give the due focus to a quality output of a product if you have too many projects going on. So you have to really curate it down to a solution that's going to be fantastic for the consumer based on whatever you intuitively think, or if you objectively learn from the consumer through insights and a lot of other work. All that's incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. It just feels like you nailed who the customer was going to be. And I think a lot of companies don't just figure out really well like who is the buyer and the customer. How did you know so early?
In certain cases with consumer products, you can do an incredibly surgical job of saying, here's the consumer, here's my insight that consumer is demonstrating there's a need in the marketplace. I'm going to design my product in for that consumer to hit that insight and that need. I'm going to make the brand based on that. That's like sounds like really neat and tidy and business school-esque. I'd say with Allbirds, it was much more a bigger identification of a trend. And sneakers are a huge industry in the U.S. It's over $50 billion in terms of just sneakers alone. And shoes are probably close to double that. But globally, shoes are a $375 billion market every year and growing. And so what is happening in that giant marketplace? What is the big like secular changes? They're not just trends, they're big changes. And that what you're describing is you've been in the area for a long time, so I think you see it through that lens. Yeah. That we didn't design it for that particular person in mind. That said, we were kind of those people. So we had been living the problem and understanding that shoes had not transformed in the way that apparel had. And I think we took a lot of lessons from companies like Lululemon, who'd really led the charge on opening up people's eyes that this is the way that consumers actually want to live. And when they live like that, they need a different set of apparel and accessories and footwear. And so we designed into that big secular change. So that was the way we were thinking at the time. It wasn't so narrow. Yeah. And I think, that was good because the market was so big. And when you're talking about smaller markets, maybe like $1 billion consumer market, it's pretty small. You got to be the winner in that category. Yeah. So you need to be very, very surgical. So I think it's different by market and different by the approach that you take to it. And there's always a balance of intuition, lived experience, and objective, kind of more scientific, rational, business school-esque style of approach to do it. And there's been a lot of businesses that are, I'd say the majority of great businesses in consumer are not built on some neat and tidy business plan.
Speaking of business school, are you glad you went to business school?
Yeah, I am.
I think with a lot of tech companies, the technical development, people don't necessarily, an MBA is not going to necessarily get what you need out of it. But I've been thinking about this a lot, and I hear a lot of conversations about it. Whether get the MBA, and does that help with entrepreneurship, or does the MBA mentality, the business plan modeling, interfere with the intuition and risk taking that you have to have with building a company?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it like reshaped me as a human being. So I don't think it like wiped out some entrepreneurial nature that I had, and it certainly didn't create it. But it that just comes from who I am and how I think about the world and how I interact with people in the world and whatnot, and a lot of lessons I learned as a kid. But what it did give me, it gave me a couple years to, I knew where I wanted to go. So I had a very fine filter. And if you go in to business school with a wide open mind and you want to try everything, and there's lots of opportunities to go after and experiment with fun stuff, I had a pretty narrow filter. I was looking at doing renewable energy, renewable technologies, very focused on that, whether it was investing, maybe, but I probably wanted to do operating. And so I had a very fine filter on the activities that I would then participate in that were like, for the professional job hunting aspect of school. And with that fine filter came, and all great creativity comes from a very clear set of constraints. And I applied those constraints and was able to come up with something that really motivated me to do after school. And then that led me to feel prepared to be able to do an entrepreneurial career. And had I not gone through those experiences, I don't think I would have been prepared to do what I eventually did with Allbirds and what I'll continue to do and beyond. All that's great. All that's important. The people that I surrounded myself with that are just my friends are some of my best friends in the world. Yeah. And we have a really tight support group that I would say that makes it sound like, Alcoholics Anonymous or something. But what I would say is we're just really good buddies and we look after each other and give a lot of help to one another. And that has created this really virtuous cycle for everybody, and it's a really unique community that we developed there, and they're a special group of people that I've drawn a lot of great support from.
Well, I mean, when you're building a company with a bunch of other people, sometimes it feels like AA over here. When people are it's like therapy every day.
Totally, totally,
it's like,
totally.
From the fundraising to
it's not easy.
Employees,
having people that have walked in your shoes before and are doing it at the same time and going through different challenges, like it's pretty damn important.
Yeah, you are one of the few guests on the show that is sat in like so many different seats. I mean, employee, executive, founder, board member. We haven't had this type of range of experience that you've had, and like for you to stay, I don't know if uncomfortable is the right word, but just stay so hungry that you're like, you know what? I'm married with 2 kids. I'm gonna go all in on this. People underestimate that. Takes a lot. It takes a lot of guts to do. Or no?
I don't know. I wouldn't frame it that way, but I would say I think that personal agency is the mantra that drives me through any decision in life. Like whatever happens, people call it stoicism sometimes. I think about it a little slightly different than that, but there's a lot of things that happen to you. You can't control some of those things, many of them, but you can control how you respond to that stimulus. And if you take the belief that one person with some creativity and an incredible amount of hard work and focus with the right experience can do something special and change the world quite quickly in, the little portion of the world that you're in. If you don't have that belief, then, you probably shouldn't be an entrepreneur. But if you do have that kind of mindset where you have agency and you do have a belief that an individual can have the mindset to do that, and then you start to think about building the teams and doing all that stuff. That is really, really hard work, but the most vital work in building a company. If you believe that your vision is strong enough to carry that forward, and you get then compelling way to communicate that to attract the most important and the most valuable people to make your company successful, then I think that belief can translate to something quite good. And I think about it less about courage or guts or anything like that, and more about a mindset, because I think people perceive a much higher risk of entrepreneurship than what the actual risk is to yourself. And we live in an incredible place. We live in the Bay Area. We live as part of the Bay Area, being part of America, where you can have entrepreneurship that's celebrated. And like you look at my co-founder, Tim, comes from New Zealand. Like Commonwealths from England, they often suffer something called the tall poppy syndrome, where if you're the tall poppy that stands out in the field, you get cut. And so people tend to bias more towards conformity and doing what the society has like always kind of done. Whereas in America, we celebrate the tall poppy. And when you celebrate the tall poppy, the only way to celebrate the tall poppy is to be accepting of the failures. And we live in a society where you can have a failure, but as long as you took great integrity and wherewithal and intelligence and to the endeavor that you're trying, even if you fail, you'll get backed again. And that's an incredible opportunity, and hence what I think that translates to is a much lower real risk to entrepreneurship than what the actual perceived risk is. I co-founded a nonprofit called Colorwave, and what we found, the whole objective here is we live in the Bay Area. There's like a huge and diverse population, particularly Black, Native American, and Latino, that are not being introduced to the entrepreneurial community. And so they're, the most talented of that population tends to bias towards going into big corporate professional jobs, and they are not getting the kind of breakthrough economic advantage and the life satisfaction from going into entrepreneurship. And so we've focused on and what we found, going back to the point why I bring this up. There is this enormous perceived risk. Like once you've gone through, some of these people have had backgrounds where it's not super privileged, and they've come through, and their parents are like, "You can get a job at Google." Like, why on earth would you make this harder on yourself?
Yeah.
And try something like entrepreneurship when you kind of have this thing in the bag. You've already won. Stop trying. Like, what are you doing? And so what we found was that this huge chasm of real and perceived risk. And so we kind of built the organization to help train people around how to succeed within an entrepreneurial environment and introduce that population into the entrepreneurial ecosystem in more formidable way. And it's been like a phenomenal success. And I think that is a really great example of that big gap that I think people have the perception. That's not to say it's easy. It is extraordinarily hard to do it, and to be successful at it is even harder. But that's not to say that the risk from a career perspective or a life satisfaction perspective are as big as one might perceive.
What is the biggest mistake you see founders make nowadays?
Yeah, so I think just give a little context. I have a venture fund called Good Friends, and back to one of your earlier questions, 3 of the other guys that I started it with are business school classmates. 2 of them, actually 3 of them started Warby Parker. 1 of them left and then started Harry's. But we did this because we are a very community-oriented group of people that see a huge value in the give and take between entrepreneurs who have like walked in those shoes, and someone else is going to walk in them in the future. To answer your question, the most important thing that I've seen in the early stages, and this is going to sound a little trite and standard, but it all comes down to the entrepreneur. I mean, like generally, if you have a okay idea and a phenomenal entrepreneur, they're going to take that idea and make it into a great idea.
Okay.
If you have a great idea and a average entrepreneur, or someone that really doesn't have what it takes to build a business, it is destined for failure every single time.
So basically, if people who starting companies who should be starting companies.
And I would say one of the things that here's how I like to kind of explain it. So I'd say the hardest part about running a company is getting the best people to help you build the company.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to identify the talent. You need to be able to identify what you need as a business to succeed. And then you need to have the courage to get those people to drop some fantastic career in what they already have to join you. Mm-hmm. And all the while, you need to have the ability to identify when they underperform in your business and they're not delivering what you can, and you need to let them go. And you need to let them go in an appropriate way with having coached them along the way to what they need to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you need to move those people and move their family, like with kids, to a different environment, to a different location. In the Bay Area, that's really hard because of how expensive it is here. But you need to do that, and then you need to do that and also make it super clear that if they don't deliver for the company, then it's not going to be a long-term thing. That is not an easy task, and I would say by and large what I found in very challenging kind of company building, it's rare that you find people that have gone through enough life experience to be able to understand that and to have a standard and have seen the standard set so high and be unapologetic about the fact that people aren't delivering against those standards, that you need to let them go. That's a very, very difficult thing that if you haven't had enough lived experience in those types of high performance environments, it's hard to really understand what good looks like. And having the self-awareness to know when you're ready to start a business, you got to think about those aspects, I would say, more than the, can I figure out how to, whatever, write the code and do whatever's necessary for whatever the kind of business it is. So that's what I would say is that the largest difference between successful businesses and unsuccessful businesses that we invest in is the person who is in charge and their maturity, self-awareness, and ability to have a vision, set high standards, and then execute against it by bringing great people to bear on the problem.
If I was going to guess what your answer was going to be, it would be somewhere like further along the line, like fundraising or building before asking what customers want. You're like, even before that, you're like, dude, should you even be starting a company in the first place?
Yeah.
So that's
those skills are translated across many of the things you just mentioned, though. I mean, if you're able to like concisely and clearly communicate a vision for an incredibly successful executive at a large company from an incumbent in your industry that you're trying to disrupt, get them over to your side, you'll probably also be able to communicate to investors why what your idea is worth funding. Yeah. So I'd say they're really translatable kind of concepts there, and it all comes down to like an ability to articulate and communicate what's so great about what you're doing.
It feels like to me, Joey, like a way some corporations are run feel like it's very similar to professional sports teams. I mean, like when you get traded or like you're a free agent, you gotta get recruited by other professional teams. And, when you're work for some corporations and they require an in-person experience, you got to move their families. And it's funny because when I hear, NBA players shout about like, damn, I'm getting traded, I got to move the family. It's the same thing with the Allbirds. There's free agency and things that you guys probably had to deal with. Yeah,
it's tougher because there's no guaranteed contracts in America. So it's harder for the employee than it is for a professional athlete with a guaranteed contract. But it's it's tough. And I would just say, the worst moments I've had is when I feel like I surprised someone when I was letting them go. And I have tried very, very hard to figure out the way to clearly communicate objectives for what that executive needs to contribute and why that ladders up to what the company needs to contribute. And our annual reviews are important to do, but I give reviews every single day. And that's way more important than the review that you give.
Immediate reviews. Hey, you're not doing your
that sounds like harsh or lame. It's just an informal conversation. This is not good enough. We need to how do we work together to make this good? And as you see that person react and respond to that, like you figure out whether they're gonna get there or not. But if you do that well enough and you are able to ladder up what their activities are to what they need to contribute to how that ladders up to what the company needs to do. If you're able to do that, then they should not be too surprised at the moment in time at the end where it's like, well, this isn't working out. And when I've been less good at doing that, that is, I feel like a failure on me. And so, and that's one of those skills I think that takes a long time to develop. And I'd say I've gotten a lot better at it. And that is one of the things, again, back to people who are maybe less mature in their evolution on those types of skills, that you see not hiring great executives, hiring less qualified people that they think they can control better versus, being able to communicate the objective, set them free against it, and let them do the best work of their life. Like, that's a great leader.
For our audience who doesn't maybe not understand the nuances. What the hell does it mean to be a board member? Like, what is it? What do you do? You're on the board. That sounds really cool. It sounds like some sick, like, yeah, I'm on the board. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what do you do?
I think it depends on the kind of company it is. So if it's a company where I would say in its formative stages and it's a founder-driven company, I think the board is should be like underwear, mostly. It should be
like underwear.
Just there for support. And do that in an incredibly supportive and positive way. And it needs to be like giving you, like, I think the best founders look for board members who have incredible experience both in company building that they don't have, in domain expertise that they don't have, meaning like the industry that they're in, that they may not, particularly if they don't come from the industry,
sure.
and that from capability sets that are important for the business to win, that they don't necessarily aren't the masters of. So we've tried to do that all along the way. We've had incredible board members at Allbirds, and I would encourage founders to get uncomfortable with the kind of people that you attract that may be a little bit of a threat to you. Those are the people that are going to give you the best support and be the most helpful in allowing you to succeed when you're trying to build this business. Now, when you have a hired gun, like a CEO that you hire as an employee CEO,
yeah.
The role of the board shifts to your job is now what I've been describing as my job as the CEO of a business. Your job is to set the expectations for what you're looking to succeed, understand what are the metrics that are like leading and lagging metrics, like meaning what can you see today that's going to give you a perspective of whether that business is on the right track or not. That's leading. And you look backwards and say, have the results been there? That's lagging. And you those clear set of metrics, and if the person is not achieving them and there is not a lot of damn good reason that the external factors are weighing more than what the leader has done, then your job is to let that CEO go and find a new CEO. So that's what the role of the board shifts to primarily.
Better have a good pair of underwear.
Yeah.
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 You Hanes, for the Loom.
I use the most supportive, best underwear there is on the planet. They're made by a company called Allbirds.
Sorry. Of course.
You don't want to put plastic around there.
Yeah.
No plastic on your junk. Get some good merino wool in there.
Yeah. No, for sure. For sure. Sustainable too.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate it, Joey. Before we get out of here, what would you like your legacy to be?
I never in a million years would think about it as a legacy. Mm-hmm. However, if I were to have someone describe how I led and what I chose to do with my time, what I would hope that those people reflected on was that I built businesses that put up great financial outcomes and also equally great public benefit outcomes, and that there's a real impact and a purpose-driven mindset around the enterprise that I was doing, and that along the way, I might not have been everyone's best friend doing that, but I had a huge amount of integrity while I was doing that. And when you're trying to do a business that's both financially and impact successful, you've increased the level of difficulty of the trick you're trying to pull here, and so you can often be tempted to do things that might cut corners. And I think if people reflect on my work career and say that I've done something that has great outcomes for both of those avenues and stakeholders, and made an impact on the world in a positive way for that reason, and also did so with integrity, that would be I would feel good about that description.
That's awesome. Well, Joey, we I know you're a busy guy. We can't keep you in here for 5 hours like how I built this, but we can give you a good hour. So we really appreciate you joining the pod. It's been another great episode of the Athletes and Assets podcast. Just going right into it, man. We appreciate you, Joey. Thank you.